teachers of Reddit, what's your most memorable "oh boy, that student definitely isn't going places" moment? I'm late to the thread, but I have a winner. The class was an applied math course for high schoolers, and we held a paper airplane design contest. The rule was that you could use anything on the table to make your airplane, and that the person who threw this the farthest down the hallway would win. The table had all manner of things on it: printer paper, construction paper, tape, rulers, compasses, toothpicks, duct tape, paper clips, masking tape, a stapler, and even Elmer's glue. Well, the class went to work, and for an hour designed some very interesting airplanes. Except for Tim. Tim sat quietly and chatted with his friends until about 30 seconds were left to build. Then he went up to the table, grabbed a few things, and sat back down to wait. When it came time to throw, it turned out that his airplane was a piece of paper wrapped around the stapler. While the lighter and more complex planes drifted to the side and landed early or hit the hallway walls, Tim's plane slammed straight into the door on the other end of the hall with a satisfying clunk. Tim's ridiculous creation beat everyone else out and won the contest easily while technically obeying the rules of the competition. I hope that guy ends up working for NASA. Edit. My other favorite student was a kid who ate a glue stick for $5. He figured it was edible because it said non-toxic. Technically correct, but so wrong. He had to go home due to the uncontrollable vomiting. I'm not sure if he was ever paid the $5. My third favorite was a middle schooler whose mom was dissed by another student in class. His reaction, not having any decent weapons on him, was to rip out the 3-ring part of a 3-ring binder and use the prongs to attack the other student's forearm. Unfortunately, that kid isn't going anywhere but juvie unless he can get help with his anger issues. Too bad, because it was an ingenious improvised weapon, and he could probably use that creativity some other way. My sister is a teacher for a local school. Like a great many teachers, she's also responsible for a form group, in this case, a rowdy and rambunctious group of 15-year-olds she'd inherited from a newly retired teacher. Some kids stand out more than others, and not always for the right reasons. The epitome of that rule existed in my sister's form group. She had the misfortune to be called Xena by her Tumblr feminist mother, and Xena herself had followed firmly in her mother's footsteps. She was considered unpopular, and certainly the other kids were unfair and cruel, but she didn't help matters herself. My sister has told many stories of Xena, up to and including the time she spontaneously began speaking in an accent, which sounded like the bastard child of a Pakistani accent, Irish, and a speech impediment. The accent vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared over the course of the lunch hour the time she claimed powers of clairvoyance in chemistry. The kid torching pencils with a Bunsen burner apparently never particularly cared if their great aunt Doreen wanted to warn them of misfortune the time she shaved her head and refused to wear her uniform because it was stifling her creativity. The John Cena meme was in full swing, and Xena had earned the nickname John Cena owing to her buzzcut and unfortunate head shape. Kids would hum his theme tune upon seeing Xena in the school. A memo was sent around the faculty concerning the matter, but half of the staff were convinced that John Cena was a politician. My sister was running improvisation drills when Xena broke in with one of her prime stories. She was the daughter of a Mauritian man named Jonathan. She said her skin was the color of milk, smooth and pale, a man of great importance. She'd been born in Mauritius and swiftly smuggled over to the UK with her mother, born and raised in England, as a newborn. There was a beat of stunned, awkward silence until a particular sheet of a child screeched, "John Cena," and slammed his mate's head into the desk. Of course I will post the classic. Just look up Kevin Reddit. Only Reddit dogs will remember Kevin. It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.99999% of the time they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability. Yeah, I know, I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we used to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with a student for a bit. I thought that's fine. I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade, and now he was in 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming tray in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists, and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when/where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at 711 after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied that it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his, not that he did it. No, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a motherfucking beach during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tasted himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin said the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, class walk, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said you should get out of those wet clothes. The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download porn onto a computer in the library at the circulation desk while he was logged on. Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all, and then writing its name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party at high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the fuck did they even get airline tickets and forgot all their luggage at home? I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to him mom, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. Oh boy. Just one. I teach high school, and every time I think I've heard the dumbest thing ever, it eventually gets topped. Here's a few shining examples. I had a student ask me why he didn't die in his sleep because he wasn't awake to remember to breath. He had no idea what involuntary functions were and said he'd been concentrating on his breathing since he could remember, and every night he went to bed terrified that he was going to die. I had a student get caught stealing a TV from someone's house. The police literally showed up and caught him walking out the door holding the TV. He couldn't understand how they found him so fast. Idiot was wearing an ankle bracelet and was on house arrest at the time. They knew the moment he left his yard. I had a student ask me what happened to Hitler after WW2. I very jokingly said that they turned him into a zombie and keep him in prison under the Pentagon. A few minutes later this girl is bawling her eyeballs out. I ask her why, and between sobs she claims she's terrified that he'll get out and do it again. The class was stunned. I was like, yo, zombies aren't real. Yes they are, I saw them on TV. This girl was 17. I had a girl proudly announce one day that her mama told her when she was little that she'd have big memories if she ate chicken. So she ate chicken every day, even though she didn't like it, but boy did it work. A young gentleman behind her calmly asked what would happen if she had eaten fish. I was teaching The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe, and I was explaining that the name of the cat Pluto comes from the Roman name for the Greek god Hades. I went through our planets and told them what god each was named after and why. When I got done this one kid accusingly announced to the class that's in Genesis. If you people read your Bible you'd know this. Literally, every time I teach Greek mythology as a prelude to Oedipus there's at least one kid, even in the honors classes, who asks me if this is real. I have a lot more of these stories. Edit. People wanted to hear more. I'll include things outside the realm of merely stupid and in the realm of holy crap that's sad. I had a student that thought that our desks didn't rot because they were made out of wood and engaged in photosynthesis. He refused to believe that photosynthesis occurred in the leaves because his science teacher told him trees did it, and he flat out just wouldn't believe the truth. Best part is that the desks were a heavy plastic. I had a student who was not allowed to walk the halls by herself. She had to be escorted by a staff member at all times between classes because she'd slip into the bathroom and start faking people. Just faking anyone. I had another female student who was paying guys $20 to let her blow them in the bathroom. One of my apps was like, I have no idea what I would do as a high school boy. She's ugly as sin, but holy shit is that economical. This same girl later told me that she was working illegally, 15 years old, as a stripper at a particular club, and gave me details about the back room that I happened to know were accurate and offered to bang me for free if I went there. I reported her to social services pretty much immediately after I got done being nauseated. I had another student pour an entire bottle of pills into a container of frosting and start chowing down on it in an attempt to commit suicide. Luckily, I realized what she was doing and was able to get medical attention. She did not die. I had a kid pull out a fifth of vodka and a Borno mag in class. He was sent to the principal's office. He told the principal that we could keep the vodka, but needed that Borno mag back for later. Put on us kids into groups of 4. One group had 5 kids. The assignment involved picking a character in the story we read and writing a letter to another group member as their character. This kid in the group of 5 stood me down that in a group of 5, there was no way for everyone to write a different person. I calmly said, just pass left. He said that'll work for the first, but what about the response? Me, pass right when you are done. For some reason he couldn't grasp this concept, that passing right sends the reply back to the proper person who got the original letter. I wasted 5 minutes with his classmates yelling at him before I made them physically pass things left, and then, right before he blushed with embarrassment and understood. That's enough for now. I have more, always so many more. Not a teacher, but my high school class had a few people like this. I, of course, will not use their real names. Chad had a great F average in every class, was one of my class's biggest bullies, and was one of the most generally hated people in the whole school. He was constantly high in class, either on meth or weed. The thing that really did it in was when I overheard him and a couple of his friends talking while they smoked in the bathroom. His plan was to take 2 extra suitcases with him on his trip to Mexico and stuff them with cheap steroids from various dealers in Mexico. He claimed that the border guards never check stuff from white people. While this point can be argued, it is neither here nor there. Chad would be flying to Mexico. Sam would probably be curious why there are 2 suitcases filled with just pill bottles. Not to mention going through customs with that point. Brad was a general dumbass. My favorite quote from him was when he asked his friend which are the uppers and which are the downers. When the friend didn't know, Brad said "fuck it" and took the whole handful. Physical science was a interesting class. I had both him and his friend as partners. I also had Brad in my English class. Our big project of the year was to make a model of something from the Elizabethan era and write a paper on it. Being the only non-druggie that would talk to him, I was forced to be his partner. I made an amazing model of a Spanish Armada galleon and wrote a great paper of all their victories up until the English defeated them. I say I did all that because he just sat there drooling due to the downers. Now, I didn't tell my teacher this. I'd rather just present what we did and get it over with. She was not about that. Brad and I got in front of the class. She gets up, pulls the outline out of my hand, tells me to sit, and tells Brad to give the presentation. You have not lived until you see a guy on 4 downers try to make a presentation on naval warfare. I did feel bad though. He deserved the F, but not the public humiliation. He didn't learn from it, though. Something like this happened in every class I had him in up until late senior year. Danny was about as dumb as they come. I never really had many conversations with her, but one event stands out. It was my class's senior year. They released the rankings and Danny was 150 out of 150. Now, she took this as she was top of the class. She went around and showed anyone that would listen. The worst part of this is, she has no learning disabilities or anything from holding her back. I, myself, have a few and got to know everyone in my grade that has them as well. She was not one of those people. Someone finally had the nerve to tell her she was last in the class. I don't know the logic going through her head. She had a 1.5 GPA. They were being nice to let her graduate as you require a 2.0 to graduate. I think she thought the rest of us were dumber than her. I did hear from her friends that she had a superiority complex, so maybe that is why Pointien was my friend. He sort of just stuck to my group and never went away. He thought we were all under him and we all thought he was a dumbass. Classic high school bullshit. The past 3 I mentioned were bad, but Ian may be the worst. Wasted potential should be his middle name. He has the intelligence of someone that could make a 3.5 at the worst if he tried. He never tried. I don't mean guessing on tests or not studying. He would just skip class because he hated tests. The teachers would always try and let him make up the test, but he never did. He would always complain about how stupid school was and how he doesn't need it because he will study quantum physics in college. He dropped out of college his freshman year because he was not going to pay to be taught by people who are stupider than me. He graduated HS with a 1.7. His mom begged them to let him graduate because she couldn't afford to send him and his brother to school at the same time and a 14 on the act. He was shocked that he didn't get into any good colleges. He now works on a farm, only talks to me when his better friends don't have drugs, and he generally hates life. Final story, because I want to end on a good note. Shelly was 16 when she got pregnant. The husband was part of the group that hangs out with Chad from the first story in this comment. She was a beach to the highest degree, would only talk to those on her popularity status, and would bully people. She got pregnant and had the child. At my HS, they only allow you excuse days when you are too pregnant to walk or are in labor. It was some bullshit. She had to come to school and get ridiculed every day. This changed her. She went from a beach and middle ground student to a delightful person and a B student. She is a junior in college now, is raising the kid, and is now a god tier human. There are so many more I can think of. My Catholic high school had so many characters. Some good and some bad. I'm not a teacher, but my high school senior class had its very own Kevin. And I'm pretty sure, if the teacher of that class reddited, she'd be posting all over here about this kid. I'm going to call him Jumpy after Jumpy from Persona 3. Jumpy was one of those neighborhood rat type kids, in spite of the fact that we all live in a white bread suburb that has no equivalent of a hood whatsoever. He'd come to school dressed in the same oversized Elmo hoodie every day and spout off hood talk and rap lyrics. Yes, Elmo. From Sesame Street point this kid would get up and walk out of class frequently and for no real reason at all. He'd legit just decide he didn't want to do class today and run out of class. Or he'd see someone he didn't like outside the door and get up and run after him. Or he'd see someone he did like outside the door and just walk out of class to go hang with them. Point he did this during tests and oftentimes just plain did not show up for the tests. How he even passed enough to graduate at all is a mystery. You could commonly find him wandering around the halls during any given class. He interrupted a unit on Beowulf to talk about what he did in Red Dead Redemption the night before. When the teacher asked what that had to do with anything, he said, well, it's from back in the day. Junpei would regularly interrupt the lessons to spew out completely random and irrelevant rap lyrics while bobbing his head around and then go completely silent until the next impromptu rap or irrelevant sheety comment. Junpei once asked the teacher, a young attractive lady fresh out of college, to come to his house so he could put his big black dick inside of her. He also regularly called her a MILF, even though she was not a mother. He had the balls to do this loudly to her face in class. I'm sure I don't even need to tell you Junpei never did the assignments or the homework. And when he bothered to show up for tests at all, he tried to cheat. Junpei would go up and steal pens off my desk. When I gave him no reaction and took out one of my spare pens, I always carried a whole box full of them to school because I dropped them a lot. He'd go back and silently slip it back onto my desk. I guess he expected me to chase after him or some shit. Junpei won prom king at the senior prom, and when I found that out, I did not go to the senior prom, only the junior. I actually asked what the fuck everyone was smoking when they made that pic. Turns out, they did it as a joke. And everyone told him the next day, you know, we voted you prom king because we thought it would be funny because you're such a douchebag. That sobered him up quite a bit. Junpei used to talk tough and start fights, but he was a weak little thing who was very easily put in his place. One of the greatest things that ever happened involving Junpei was when he went up to this girl and started harassing the shit out of her, and she pushed him into a desk, causing him to go holy shit and tuck his tail between his legs and leave. She did not get in trouble for this, purely because the teacher saw that he was harassing her. I don't know how Junpei managed to graduate high school or where he is now, and I do not care. Okay, so classmate here, and if my professor saw this he'd be posting so in his stead. This one kid in my dendrology class, we will call him C. Now C started off okay in this class. He was weird and didn't get social cues. Well, C seemed fine, maybe just a little autistic. But later he started bragging he failed this class last semester. Not just saying it, but literally bragging that he failed. He thought it was a prize point anyways. He continues to do so for the first few months or so. Throughout these months he also comes up during field quizzes and asks, hey, what's this tree or that? Was a completely obvious it's not tree, right? Then we have Latin quizzes for the scientific names of these trees, and this faker is sitting in front of the tower with his phone in his lap cheating on the quiz. Every single class so mid-semester comes, and he gets an email from our professor saying he needs to drop this class, or he will fail it. Good guy professor trying to save his grade, but he instead brags about it, and decides now I'll keep going, I've already failed once, it's fine. Well, he gets more emails and gets called out in class when he brags about getting 1 out of 15 trees right, and when he gets caught cheating again. Anyways, end of semester comes and he doesn't show up to the treed final nor the written management final. I haven't seen him since, but I've seen his little car around town. It's hard to miss with the Resident Evil 4 logos all over it and the multiple bloody zombies on it. I don't think he is going anywhere in life. I feel sorry for him, but yet again he was given multiple chances to fix some problems, but decided not to, so I'm not sure I really care. I have one from yesterday, but it was more, oh boy, that student is going places, but where? We'll call him Professor X. He's 11 and incredibly smart, but his moral compass doesn't point north. For example, last year his class took a How Machiavellian Are You? Quiz in their cultural studies class, and he scored a 9/10 point anyway. Professor X was doing an internet activity about cyberbullying, and the worksheet asked him to write advice/message to a target bystander and cyberbully. When he got to bystander, he flipped out. PX. Why does the bystander have to do anything? He's not doing anything wrong. He might be afraid he'd get bullied too if he butts in and offends the target, me. Said all of the Germans during World War II who did nothing as Hitler took all of the Jews away and killed them. Oh, it's not my problem, PX. They were probably too scared that they would get in trouble with the Germans and get sent away, too, me. That's exactly the point. The reason Hitler was so successful is because practically no one stood up to them in Germany because they were too afraid and figured it wasn't their problem. PX. Are you telling me I'm supposed to risk my life and go underground to help them? That's insane. I could die. Me. You're supposed to stand up for what is right and not let people bully others. It's what makes the world PX a better place. I know. It's stupid. I don't want to get in trouble just to help someone else. It went on like this for a while, but he was completely serious. I finally told him to stop being so pedantic and just write down the correct answer and turn it in. This kid is going places, but boy, do I hope I'm not around him to experience it. I teach at a Title I read poor school, so most of mine are more serious than the top posts. Kid sucker punched his math teacher for telling a joke the kid didn't like. Kid who never came to school last year. Truant probably 9 days out of every 10 got so drunk on the first day of school this year that she had to go to the hospital for alcohol poisoning and almost died. When asked why her kids weren't in school more often, the student's mom shrugged and said, "They don't want to go. Who's going to make them?" Student was 12 at the time of the incident. Kid with such bad anger issues that every day he walked into my class with the intention of hurting as many people as he could as badly as possible. Parents were very young, 16 and 18, when they started having kids. Parents of 4 were homeless, taking care of mom's parents too, were gang members, and dad was put in prison last year. The student was just a really sensitive kid with bad social anxiety who needed counseling and a stable home life, neither of which his parents were willing/able to provide him. Homeless kid with that from a large and unsupportive family full of kleptomaniacs who took the supplies given to him by the school and, I don't know, pawned them. Never has his stuff, never has his work, has a hard time concentrating. Most kids would be okay in the right family environment. Some families can't or won't provide the support needed by that child. If the kid doesn't have the strength to rise above their upbringing, they are not going to make it. It's as simple and tragic as that. Not a teacher, but a student. In 3rd grade I was in the same class as this kid, let's call him Colin, who had severe anger issues. Our teacher organized the students into table groups, and he and I, along with 2 other girls, were in the same table group. He wasn't the smartest, and always performed badly on tests and quizzes. When my teacher would ask him to answer a question, he'd make up some random answer that made no sense. He would hit the table with his head and hands when he got frustrated, and frequently snapped pens, pencils, markers, and whatever in half. We, my table group, along with the rest of the class, hated him. I'm pretty sure my teacher did too. He frequently visited the school counselor, but unfortunately he could not be put in special ed because he didn't qualify or something like that. The teacher got frustrated with him often, and he was quite rude to her. One time, the Friday before April Fool's, which was on a Monday that year, we got test scores back. I, along with the rest of my table group, did very well. He did poorly and became angry at us for being "better than him." He started to say some things, and for some reason my 9-year-old smartass told him to shut up. This angered him greatly, and he threatened to hide all my school supplies on Monday as an April Fool's joke. I told the teacher, and she told me that she would make sure it wouldn't happen. Lo and behold, that Monday, when I came into class, I couldn't find any of my sheet. It turns out, when the teacher had stepped out to get something from the printer, he had took my pencil box from her desk. She had it there so that he wouldn't take it, hid all of my things. When we asked him to tell us where everything was, he refused, and for the rest of the day sat on a chair in the corner of the classroom as a punishment. A few weeks later, he had a very violent outburst. The teacher, worried for our safety, gathered the students at one end of the classroom. He threw a chair at the poor woman and just tore up the classroom. He was out of class for a few weeks after that, for treatment I guess, but he returned all the same. He was a real asshole. Late to the party, but I have to share. Obligatory not a teacher. I took an intensive 2-year software development course at a technical college. It was absolutely brutal, but those of us that survived were given a golden ticket to a better career, so it was worth it. The failure rate was close to 55%, mostly due to poor time management. But I will never forget Bizarro James. This poor kid would sit through class quietly, and then towards the end of at least one class a day raise his hand to ask a question. I think he thought he had to ask a question, as if the teacher were keeping track. After a month or so the teacher started to sigh. When his hand went up he would spend a solid 2 minutes on a breathless, rambling question that related to something we'd been taught and tested on weeks ago. After the first half of his question his eyes would wander away from the teacher. I think he was talking to himself at that point. When he'd finish there would be this moment of awkward silence as the teacher tried to process the free-flowing nonsense and then just ask Bizarro James to see them after class. To my knowledge he didn't point the first day of the second semester. I'm hanging out with a couple of guys from my class, talking about our marks from the first semester. Bizarro James shuffles up to us and asks what we are up to and then says, "Ooh, you guys can see your marks. How did you do that?" He hadn't been aware you could look up your marks on the school website point. So we go back to his table and pop open his laptop and I show him how to get to his marks. And we are looking down the low numbers and he says, "What do those W's mean?" To which I have to reply, those mean you failed, James. You're not allowed to be here anymore." He literally had no clue that he'd failed out of the first semester of the program. He just showed up to the second semester because that's what he thought he had to do. He packed up and I never saw him again. I have no idea who thought it was a good idea to waste several $1,000s on sending him, but I hope he ended up in a better place. This reminds me of the Kevin story from a few years ago. Not my story, just copied. It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.99999% of the time they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability. Yeah, I know. I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we used to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with a student for a bit. I thought that's fine. I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade, and now he was in 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming tray in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists, and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when/where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided, to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at 711 after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied that it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his, not that he did it, no, he denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a motherfucking beach during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tasted himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin said the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The high school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, class walk, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said you should get out of those wet clothes. The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download porn onto a computer in the library at the circulation desk. While he was logged on, Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom by asking for her phone number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing its name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party at high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the fuck did they even get airline tickets and forgot all their luggage at home? I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to him mom, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day.